St. Augustine's one of the most famous theologians, somebody that ranks up there in Christian theology, a C.S. Lewis or a Thomas Aquinas, people that names you can toss around and people know who you're talking about. And today we'll be talking about St. Augustine, his story, which is almost as remarkable, if not more remarkable, than the theology that he comes out with. But he is a giant in terms of Christian spirituality, and he is known for his transformation, very similar from like a Saul to Paul type story, where he's going to go and really turn his life around. Now, Augustine's born as a Roman in North Africa, and he has the kind of family where the mom's a very, very devout Christian, and his dad is a man of learning, kind of well-educated in the classical Greco-Roman educational system, that kind of type of thinking. And he lives the wild life. He goes and fathers a child out of wedlock. He's known for going and being involved in all the vices, and you can use your imagination there. He goes and does all those bad things that you can imagine that a young 20-something-year-old guy would do. And he's basically kind of a teacher slash a principal of going and educating people in this classical, Greco-Roman style system. He would go and, his mom, her name is Monica, you're kind of stupid. You believe all this, Bible stuff, really? And he goes and gets the deal of a lifetime to go to Milan, right? So he's in northern Africa. He's going to move from Carthage to Milan and open up basically a school. So he heads up to Milan. Now, while he goes to Milan, he begins going to church, not necessarily because he wants to convert to Christianity, but because there's a speaker there. His name's Ambrose, and he later becomes a saint, because you become a saint, obviously, after you die. You can't be a saint while you're alive, unfortunately. And he starts listening to Ambrose. I compared to Morgan Freeman, because I love Morgan Freeman's voice. He could read anything, and I would think it's interesting. Ambrose is similar, right? He's a good speaker, and although Augustine thinks Ambrose is nuts, he likes his passion for his subject. He respects Ambrose's passion. And, Ambrose is obviously very intelligent. But over time, Augustine's going to kind of have a spiritual struggle. And he's going to start questioning, maybe Ambrose, and my mom for that matter, are correct. Maybe their beliefs aren't so nuts as I originally thought. And he gives what I describe as the most half-hearted prayer you could ever give to God. Grant me chastity and continence, just not yet. Basically, I'm enjoying being young too much. But he knows he's kind of having one of these crises of who am I, as a young man? Where do I fit? Is Christianity really as nuts as it seems? And his conversion story is very, very famous. Augustine goes, and one day he can't take it anymore. He knows he has in his own power, he cannot give up his wild lifestyle. And God, why would God love him? Why would God love me? I've screwed up so much. And he famously goes under a fig tree and cries. And cries and cries and cries and cries. However, clear as a bell, he hears a child's voice, almost like in a sing-song voice, start telling him, take up and read, take up and read, take up and read. Meaning, take up and read the Bible. And according to the kind of story, he kind of flips the Bible open to a page and sees if it connects to his life, and it does. It's Romans 13:13, which is a letter from Paul, very similar, right? Paul got his life cleaned up, basically saying the old adage, just a bit cliche, but right, give your life over to Jesus, give him the steering wheel of your life, and he'll take control. He'll be able to handle what you can't handle. He'll take your burdens. Augustine on his own was not able to go and deal with his sins. He's going to have to go hand those over to Jesus. And at this point, Augustine is going to convert to Christianity and become slowly but surely a spiritual giant. He becomes not just a priest, but a bishop of my favorite city ever, Hippo, which is just a fun city. It's in northern Africa. And he writes 2 books. The first one is Confessions, or Works, you really call them. And the second is the City of God. And the Confessions by Augustine are basically how I know that story that I just told you, is he confesses all the screwed up stuff that he did and how bad of a person he was. The City of God is an interesting story. He goes and describes human history as a conflict between 2 different cities. There's the City of God and the City of Man. Augustine's writing this within the context of the Roman Empire crumbling apart. And the city of man is kind of like the Roman Empire. It goes in and wants power. It's selfish, etc. The city of God, has all the good godly qualities: mercy, justice, grace, etc. And he says, just like how the Roman Empire is falling apart, the city of man will fall apart, and the city of God ultimately will go and conquer. And human history is the story of city of man versus city of God. So the way you could remember it, okay, this is a bit kind of stupid, so don't judge me if you think it's silly. He goes from Vegas to the Vatican. Basically, his life is, he basically spends the first part of his life in the city of man, and then he goes to the city of God. Okay, nothing against Las Vegas, but you know what I mean. He lives, the sin city, and then he becomes, like a really holy religious type dude. He's known as the last classical man. Classical, people always forget what that means. It means Greco-Roman, right? It means ancient. And he's known as the first medieval man, meaning we're getting to the idea that the Middle Ages are starting. He made a couple theological arguments that are important that you need to be aware of. One is that basically God exists both within time and outside of time, meaning that God can see past, present, and future all at the same time, and it's basically could be all present to him. He also goes and discusses the idea of original sin, the idea that this sin from Adam and Eve is passed down from us. This doctrine is really discussed at length by St. Augustine, and it helps emphasize the role that Jesus has to play. He also goes and makes a very controversial, to some people, statement. That is, that Christians can go to war. And this is, I obviously understand this may ruffle some feathers of, what would Jesus do, right? But I want to just talk about the theory of just war because it's very interesting and it's still debated today and still talked about. Are there criteria for going to war and are there criteria for acting within war? Just means as in justice, not like, oh, I just ate a sandwich for lunch. It means justice. Now, the first part of just war is just ad bellum, is how do you determine if there are criteria to be met? How do you determine how to go to war? The second one is just in bello. How should you act once you're in war as a Christian? So we'll talk about both of these. This is just kind of a preview to it, just so you kind of start thinking about, is this a good theory? For certain wars, have criteria been met, etc. First one is, how do we decide to go to war? So one thing that's been discussed is just cause, meaning the life must be innocent. It must be in like a very close, imminent, or immediate danger. The second part is that you must have some probability that you can win. You don't have a futile cause. You don't want to fight a battle that you know you will lose. And the last one is you've tried everything else. Have you tried peaceful alternatives? I'll let you decide, was this criteria met for Hitler with World War II? Was, America in the right? Something like that, just something to consider. And then Justin Bellows, how do you conduct yourself within war? Well, a Christian should go and be able to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants, or citizens and soldiers, if you want to call it that. You have to go and take into account, if you're going to have what we call collateral damage. Is somebody else that's maybe an innocent bystander be killed? How do we determine that proportionality of the ratio of soldiers to citizens? Is if you have 1,000 bad guys with one good guy and you can, drop a bomb, is that morally acceptable? So those are just questions. I'm not giving answers by any means. And then military necessity basically says if you're going to do killing, you basically need to use the minimum force to do it. Obviously not torturing or mutilating the body, just doing your job, if that makes sense. So Augustine goes, he's the type of guy that really transformed his life, contributes so much to Christian theology, and his story just makes it all the more fun to understand and appreciate his theological, basically ideas that he brings to the table.